I am a bookish girl on a mission. I am usually a library reader and tend to borrow rather than purchase my next read, but I am in dire need of my own physical copy of A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. I'll explain more later, but for now, join me as I run around the East Village on a beautiful summer Sunday. Welcome to the channel. My name is Jem. I share my life living in New York City as a 30-year-old who cares deeply about art, nature, and living an intentional life. I invite you to stick around if that interests you. Here she is. She's beautiful. I was hoping for this cover. I went to Village Works, which was a great bookshop down here, but it mostly had New York authors and I think just like an eclectic mix of thrifted things, and I didn't see Virginia Woolf anywhere. But right around the corner was Afterwards Bookshop, and it was really cute. It had an outdoor patio, and I'm definitely gonna go back there at some point with a little drink and a book. But they did have her, and I'm really excited to read it, and it fits perfectly in my bag. Thank God, because for the Ariana Grande concert, we can only bring clear purses and they have to be really small. And so I knew this was a thin book and pretty small, but I was hoping she would fit in the purse. Thought I was gonna have to fit it standing up, but it like fits like this. Really excited to read this. I might start it on the train on the way to the concert. I have about 2 hours before the concert, so I am gonna try to get some sushi. But before that, I wanna go to this photo booth downtown in the Lower East Side. Hopefully the line isn't really long. I am getting hungry and I definitely need to eat. So I'm gonna head out now. Let's see if I can show you how it fits in the purse. Okay, look how small this purse is. Very small. You're gonna see how much I struggle to get it in there, and I do have to bend it, and this is also why it's nice that it's my own copy, because I have to like slide it in here, bend it a little, but it goes. It fits, and it actually looks really cute with the clear bag because it's such a nice cover. It's kind of like, honestly, a moment. We love her. Our adventure was a success, so really happy about that. Now let's get some sushi and go to the photo booth. The line for that photo booth was insane. I mean, like, honestly, it wasn't even that long. I could just tell, though, that the people who were waiting there had been there for a while. I asked two of the girls who were middle of the line kind of how long they were waiting, and they were like, yeah, we've been waiting a while. So I was like, thank you. And I swiftly went on my way because I'm hungry. I don't have a lot of time. I'd rather go on a random weekday when it's empty and I don't have to stand there waiting and I can take my time in the photo booth. It is what it is. There's another one that I'm passing now that has no line, but I don't know how good it is. Honestly, I think I'm gonna go on this. Hello. It has been over a week since we last spoke. I had a great time that Sunday, running around New York City. It was a beautiful day. I woke up the next day. It was a Monday. tired. But that makes sense. It was a late night. But then somewhere along the way, I started to feel really weird. Turns out I was sick. With what? I couldn't tell you. Probably just a cold. But I was on the couch for a week. I did want to share a little bit about why I was so desperately looking for a room of one's own. And the reason is I am starting my own personal curriculum, and A Room of One's Own is my first book. If you don't know what a personal curriculum is, it is pretty much a self-directed lesson plan. Whatever themes, genres, authors, pieces of media that you want to explore and engage with, it's up to you. My favorite part of college was reading and discussing. So for me, this is like recreating college on my own terms and for free. I love that for me. I am going through a big transition and I'm thinking a lot about my future. I'm thinking about what kind of person I want to be, what I want my life to look like. And honestly, I'm really interested in literature and art and media that digs into these big questions that I'm asking myself. And that leads me back to A Room of One's Own. I just recently moved in with my boyfriend. We're really lucky. We have a 2-bedroom. This is my bedroom and it's mine to decorate how I want. Have I done that? No. And I've had a lot of guilt about that because I know how lucky I am. I know how privileged I am, how much people would kill to have a room of their own, and I'm not making it my own. A Room of One's Own, the thesis of it was haunting me. I had never read A Room of One's Own, but I generally knew the gist, which was the Virginia Woolf argues that a woman needs economic resources in order to have a creative life. Now that I'm reading it, I'm realizing there's a lot more to it, but that was kind of the gist, and I was feeling almost like the ghost of Virginia Woolf haunting me in terms of like, girl, like, do you know how lucky you are? I was like, enough. I am over being haunted. I am going to read this book and use it as a way to engage with what's going on with me personally. And so here we are with A Room of One's Own. By the way, in case you didn't know, because I didn't, A Room of One's Own is actually based off of a set of speeches that she gave at 2 women's colleges and that they then published in 1929 into an extended essay. It's about 6 chapters, 100 pages. And in the first chapter, immediately she interrogates the prompt that she was given for these speeches, which was, by the way, women in fiction. She says, the title Women in Fiction might mean, and you may have meant it to mean, women and what they are like. Or it might mean women in the fiction they write. Or it might mean women in the fiction that is written about them. Or it might mean that somehow all 3 are inextricably mixed together and you want me to consider them in that light. But when I began to consider the subject in this last way, which seemed the most interesting, I soon saw that it had one fatal drawback. I should never be able to come to a conclusion. I love that immediately she's like, this is a very big topic that y'all gave me, and I don't know if I can answer all the different ways that this prompt can go. She says, I should never be able to fulfill what is, I understand, the first duty of a lecturer, to hand you, after an hour's discourse, a nugget of pure truth to wrap up between the pages of your notebooks and keep on the mantelpiece forever. That is really the pressure with any art form, is to make something meaningful that someone else will find worth in holding on to and carrying with them beyond the time that they spend with you. And so I felt really validated by that. But again, I also love that she's saying, I'm not gonna be able to meet this standard. My own standard, I won't be able to meet it. I'm telling you now. I really honestly love a realistic queen. And then she jumps into her thesis. She goes, all I could do was to offer you an opinion upon one minor point. A woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction. And that, as you will see, leaves the great problem of the true nature of women and the true nature of fiction unsolved. I have shirked the duty of coming to a conclusion upon these 2 questions. Women in fiction remain, so far as I'm concerned, unsolved problems. Again, she's like, hey, I can only tackle this from one point. And honestly, the point that she chose, like, it's really juicy. And 100 years later, it continues to be so relevant. As much as she's talking about writing fiction specifically in this essay, I just find this relevant as a woman to any creative field. And I'm gonna leave that there with you. And I'm excited to come back and we'll dig more into chapter 2 soon. I am back and we are digging into chapter 1 of A Room of One's Own. After Virginia Woolf sets up her thesis, she tells her audience, now we're jumping into narrative. And our narrator is enjoying a beautiful October day on a university campus known as Oxbridge. And on this fictional campus, our narrator is thinking about life, just enjoying the day. But she keeps finding herself interrupted. Everywhere she goes, she is told she cannot go there because she is a woman and not one of the male students. And as she continues walking around, just trying to kill some time before she has a luncheon on said campus, she starts to wonder what it takes to keep funding an institution like this one. And she realizes it is no longer the kings who are funding such institutions. Only the gold and silver flowed now, not from the coffers of the king, but from the chests of merchants and manufacturers, from the purses of men who had made, say, a fortune from industry and returned in their wills a bounteous share of it to endow more chairs, more lectureships, more fellowships in the universities where they had learned their craft. I want us to go back to a time when funding education, arts, public spaces was a sign of status. Because nowadays, rich men do not give to institutions the way that they used to. I mean, to some extent they do. The thing is, they're not giving to great institutions. Anyways, our narrator continues on pondering this, and before she knows it, it's time for her luncheon. And then she has the most spectacular time. She has a great meal, the vibes are high, the conversation is flowing, but then she looks out the window and notices a cat without a tail. And she realizes as she's leaving this luncheon that things are not the same the way they used to. Things have changed since the war. In this part, Virginia is talking about the First World War and how much society has changed. And now, 100 years later, global warfare is so common, but still what she says here about war hits so true. Shall we lay the blame on the war? When the guns fired in August 1914, did the faces of men and women show so plain in each other's eyes that romance was killed? Certainly it was a shock, to women in particular with their illusions about education and so on, to see the faces of our rulers in the light of the shell fire. So ugly they looked. German, English, French, so stupid. Still, this rings so true. War just continues to ruin and disintegrate humanity and romance in our society. And it's deeply tragic. Our narrator goes onward with her day, and before she knows it, it's dinner time. And she has a completely different experience this time around. The food is not good, the vibe is not right, the conversation is trash. And she's really upset. She is like, why is this experience so different than the one I just had? And she asks her dinner companion, Mary, what is going on? She's like, girl, what is up with this meal? What is up with the vibes? And Mary goes on to clearly repeat what has been told to her, which is, since the women's college had such difficulty finding funding, the amenities will have to wait. And this devastates our narrator. She says, the human frame, being what it is, heart, body, and brain, all mixed together and not contained in separate compartments as they will be, no doubt, in another million years, which pause, crazy to think about. A good dinner is of great importance to good talk. One cannot think well, love well, sleep well if one has not dined well. I could not agree more. Period. I think she's totally in her right to be upset about these two parallel experiences, especially when it's a comparison between the sexes and the male college and the women's college. I would be upset too. And she goes on to wonder if instead Mary's mother had been a man of industry, if she had passed down money to the institution that her daughter would later attend. But then she realizes she probably wouldn't have her daughter marry if that was the case. She says, making a fortune and bearing 13 children, no human being could stand it. She continues, people say too that human nature takes its shape in the years between 1 and 5. If Miss Seton, I said, had been making money, what sort of memories would Mary have had of games and quarrels? Still to this day, 100 years later, even though we can own a bank account, we can own property, we can vote, we can marry whoever we want, it doesn't matter. We still have the pressure of both wanting to have a career and wanting to be ambitious and successful and wanting to be good mothers. She has this one last part that really strikes me because it reminds me of my mother. She's saying that there is a reason, of course, there has to be, why these women did not set up their daughters better. And she says, to raise bare walls out of bare earth was the utmost they could do. I really feel that is an experience I can relate to because my mother could only raise bare walls out of bare earth. And I feel so grateful for what she has been able to do. But at the same time, I wonder what my life would be like if the mothers before her had a better world that they were raised in. Women not having rights for centuries continues to impact women today. And I'm one of them. That's pretty much chapter 1. Our narrator ends her night thinking about the effect of poverty on the mind. And she says, thinking of the safety and prosperity of the one sex, and of the poverty and insecurity of the other, and of the effect of tradition and of the lack of tradition upon the mind of a writer. I thought at last that it was time to roll up the crumpled skin of the day with its arguments and its impressions and its anger and its laughter and cast it into the hedge. And I too will cast it into the hedge. Until next time. I will see you guys soon. We'll dive into chapter 2 next. Hi, y'all. I am back and I am reporting from my couch where I am suffering from the first day of my period. But it's all good because I have the heating pad on. I've washed my hair, which was a huge accomplishment for me today. And we're going to get into chapter 2. After a day of lunching and dining at Oxbridge, our narrator finds herself at the British Museum in London. And it is here that she realizes that there are books upon books upon books written about women by men. And this prompts her to say, are you aware that you are perhaps the most discussed animal in the universe? And I read this line and I was like, girl, you're so right. We are. What was surprising and difficult of explanation was the fact that sex, woman that is to say, also attracts agreeable essayists, light-fingered novelists, young men who have taken the MA degree, men who have taken no degree, men who have no apparent qualification save that they are not women. There is a current movie out right now, I will not name names, that really has me thinking about how much men struggle with depicting women in any kind of way that is beyond half-baked. Women will be the emotional core of their story, but we will not be fleshed out characters. And that to me is embarrassing. Speaking of embarrassing, our narrator finds herself enraged, understandably so, about a Professor Von X who has written a work titled The Mental, Moral, and Physical Inferiority of the Female Sex. And this really gets our narrator thinking. Why do men feel this way about women? What gives them the audacity? Anger, I called it, but it was anger that had gone underground and mixed itself with all kinds of other emotions. To judge them from its odd effects, it was anger disguised and complex, not anger simple and open. She goes on to say, with the exception of Fogg, he seemed to control everything. Yet he was angry. She compares it to how rich people feel about the poor and how they feel that the poor will seize their power. She says, possibly, when the professor insisted a little too emphatically upon the inferiority of women, he was concerned not with their inferiority, but with his own superiority. That was what he was protecting rather hot-headedly and with too much emphasis, because it was a jewel to him of the highest price. And the next few sentences are probably my favorite of this chapter. She says, life for both sexes, and I looked at them shouldering their way along the pavement, is arduous, difficult, a perpetual struggle. It calls for gigantic courage and strength. More than anything, perhaps, creatures of illusions as we are, it calls for confidence in oneself. Without self-confidence, we are as babes in the cradle. And how can we generate this imponderable quality, which is yet so invaluable, most quickly? By thinking that other people are inferior to oneself. By feeling that one has some innate superiority. It may be wealth or rank, a straight nose, or the portrait of a grandfather by Romney. For there is no end to the pathetic devices of the human imagination over other people. I do think one of the deepest tragedies of humanity is how advanced we are with technology, literature, language, and we still find such a necessity out of making other people small so that we can feel big. I think she does a great job of pulling out why. Life is hard, and life requires that one feels strong within oneself. And unfortunately, a lot of people do not feel that way, and they will do whatever to make themselves feel important. And unfortunately, for thousands of years, this has led to the subjugation of other kinds of people. Women have served all these centuries as looking glasses, possessing the magic and delicious power of reflecting the figure of man at twice its natural size. This reminds me of that quote of behind every powerful man is a powerful woman. And I love this part because she points out that men react so much worse when it is a woman criticizing them as opposed to a man criticizing them. That is why Napoleon and Mussolini both insist so emphatically upon the inferiority of women. For if they were not inferior, they would cease to enlarge. That serves to explain, in part, the necessity that women so often are to men, and it serves to explain how restless they are under her criticism, how impossible it is for her to say to them, this book is bad, this picture is feeble, or whatever it may be, without giving far more pain and rousing far more anger than a man would do who gave the same criticism. For if she begins to tell the truth, the figure in the looking glass shrinks. His fitness for life is diminished. This reminds me of red-pilled culture and how, unfortunately, young men of the next generation, and honestly of every generation, are really frustrated with women. And it's because of this looking glass effect. How women view them or don't view them enrages them. It makes them feel small. And ultimately, the blame gets passed back to the woman. I don't think they realize that they have given us a power that we never asked for. Our narrator goes on to say, if I got money, I am not worried about y'all. You cannot find me being pressed about a man. I need not hate any man. He cannot hurt me. I need not flatter any man. He has nothing to give me. One of the greatest gifts of my independence has been not needing to center men in my life. Men as a concept, you will not find me pressed. This reminds me that there was a time that women didn't have a choice. You were so connected to men financially, there was no hope for independence. That was not something women could dream of. And now, in this present day, we have that choice. We do not have to depend on a man for our sense of independence and our sense of self. And that is beautiful. And I will make that choice every single day. You cannot make me hate any man. You cannot make me flatter any man. No, you can't. No, you can't. I think I'm going to leave my review there of chapter 2 because honestly, those are the best bits. And I'm also losing light here in the living room. But I do want to say I have given a lot of attention to chapter 1 and chapter 2 of this essay. And I will say it's because it's my favorite part. I feel like these are the richest portions of the book. And to me, the most interesting and compelling because there's so much to it to compare and contrast to our current society. I will probably go through the next couple chapters a little bit faster. And it's interesting because those chapters are actually very popular. That's where she talks about a hypothetical sister to Shakespeare. That's also where she talks about different women writers of her time and what she thinks of them. But honestly, I find those parts less compelling, and I will share more on why. I'll see you guys soon. We finally have some sunshine in New York. It has been raining for days. And so I'm really happy because we have some beautiful weather. So I thought it would be fun to come out to the park, to my favorite tree, and dig into the rest of a room of one's own. I'm gonna be honest, I do not love these next couple chapters. They are not as compelling as chapters 1 and 2. It's interesting because these are actually some of the most popular portions of the book, especially in chapter 3, where she talks about Judith Shakespeare. And this is her thought experiment about what the world would have been like for Judith Shakespeare, a sister of Shakespeare who's just as talented as him. And she concludes she would have gone crazy and she would have never been able to survive in such a society. And I can imagine in her time period, this was a really important argument to make because men were probably like, well, if women are equal to men, why don't they create the things that men do? Whereas today, I feel like if that argument is still being made, it is just ignorance. In our history of humanity, you do not see women represented the way men are because they have been disenfranchised and have not had rights the way men have. And that is just a point that I don't feel like I need to add on to. And then chapters 4 and 5, she spends most of the time talking about women writers of her time and what she thinks of them, what she thinks makes a great woman writer. And that is where I'm not really interested in her take on writers of her time. And I also don't really agree with her. She says ultimately that women who write with a chip on their shoulder, jaded and frustrated by their oppression, are not as good writers as writers who transcend such oppression. I don't necessarily agree with that. I find there's value in angry women. I find that there's many talented women who wrote deeply about their oppression. And I don't necessarily think that there needs to be this sense of like calm or this sense of transcendence of one's oppression to be a good writer. I understand what she's saying, but ultimately it's just not something that rings entirely true for me. So these chapters didn't leave me with as strong of an impression as the first two, but there are quotes in each one that I like and that I wanted to share with y'all. In chapter 3, she talks about the different experiences men and women face as writers. And she says, the indifference of the world, which Keats and Flaubert and other men of genius have found so hard to bear, was in her case not indifference, but hostility. The world did not say to her, as it said to them, write if you choose, it makes no difference to me. The world said with a guffaw, right? What's the good of your writing? There is a big difference between being dismissed as an artist and being discouraged as an artist. Dismissal isn't great, but being discouraged, to be told that you're not valid, that you don't deserve to take up space in a world, it's just a disservice to our world as we know it. To not have different people sharing their voice and self-expression and genius with the world because you think that they have nothing of value to add. That's the worst things we can do to each other. That being said, she goes on to say, many people will argue that people of genius should not care what others think. But But she says, unfortunately, it is precisely the men and women of genius who mind most what is said of them. As a creative person, I can attest to this. Creative people care a lot of what other people think about them. They want their work to resonate, to be liked, to be seen, to be valued. But ultimately, to be an artist is to be perceived. You have to be willing to be perceived, but also not let it hold you back. Not let the fear and the impact of being perceived stop you from putting yourself out there. Chapter 4 holds one of the most famous quotes of this essay. One must have been something of a firebrand to say to oneself, oh, but they can buy literature too. Literature is open to everybody. I refuse to allow you, beetle though you are, to turn me off the grass. Lock up your libraries if you like. There is no gate, no lock, no bolt that you can set upon the freedom of my mind. That was one of my favorite things my mom told me growing up. Your education, no one can take it from you. No one can take your knowledge. No one can take your intelligence. No one can take your curiosity. No one can take your wonder. People might try to take away your freedom, but they can't take away your mind. Not really. That will always be yours. And lastly, chapter 5, which I said she spent a lot of talking about what she thinks makes a great woman writer. But I do like how she ends the chapter. Give her another 100 years, I concluded, reading the last chapter. Give her a room of her own and 500 a year. Let her speak her mind and leave out half that she now puts in, and she will write a better book one of these days. This is kind of crazy of a quote because she's insulting the writing and saying, hey, you'll be better in 100 years. What she's really trying to get at is that the progress of women happens slowly. It's through the rights and the freedoms that we deserve that allow us to progress. We are trying to catch up for centuries of disenfranchisement. Reading this, the one thing that has stuck with me is how little time 100 years is. So much in this book that still rings really true. And so that quote makes me think, where will women writers, women artists, women creatives, women of all kind be in 100 years? In some interesting way, it motivates me even more to create and share my work out to the world, because who knows where in 100 years, God willing, we are still on this planet and they haven't blown up all our records of existence. Hopefully women will be able to look back and see where we are now and be able to learn from us and relate to us and see how much things have changed and how much things haven't changed, and from that be able to grow for the next 100 years to come. I was relieved to end chapter 5 on an inspiring note because I really didn't enjoy too much of those last few chapters. But I did love chapter 6. I think she ended the essay really strong, and I'm excited to finish up our reading of A Room of One's Own. I'm going to enjoy this beautiful sunny day in New York. I'll see you guys soon. I went into A Room of One's Own expecting it to be a call to reclaim the domesticity of having a space to yourself. Secretly, I was hoping it would help me romanticize the process of decorating my bedroom. This is so naive and funny to me now. What a perfect example of the age of industry that Virginia wrote about. In 2026, a woman may have a room of her own, but industry and its prodding stick, the internet, will tell you all the ways in which you need to spend money to make it yours. I can't help but wonder what Virginia would think of the way women are marketed to these days, now that they do have $500 and a room of their own. I wonder what she would think of this current trend of women romanticizing the idea of not working, not having their own money. I have to believe she'd see it for what it is. Women as a whole, who have not been poor for 200 years, but from the beginning of times, are trying to escape the weight of an anvil. And what would she think of this medium of mine, of content creation? At the end of the book, she tells her audience, praise and blame alike mean nothing. So long as you write what you wish to write, that is all that matters. And whether it matters for ages or only for hours, nobody can say. I would hope that thought extends to all creative mediums, ones she couldn't even dream of in 1929. She also says that it is much more important to be oneself than anything else. Do not dream of influencing other people. That last part created a whole new list of questions I would ask Virginia if I were ever able to sit across from her at a dinner table. In this moment, from my unique point of view, I find all of this both inspiring and delightful, especially the former in the final pages when she says, the spirit of Judith Shakespeare lives in you and in me, and in many other women who are not here tonight, for they are washing up the dishes and putting the children to bed. She says, if we live another century or so, if we have the habit of freedom and the courage to write exactly what we think, then the opportunity will come and the dead poet, who is Shakespeare's sister, will put on the body which she has so often laid down, and that it is up to us to put in the work to create a world in which that is possible, but that she would come if we worked for her, and that so to work, even in poverty and obscurity, is worthwhile. I can almost see the crowd standing for an ovation after that final sentence. I pretty much did the same thing in my living room. This essay, like many feminist essays, is not perfect, but reading and making this video about it opened up something in me. It was a good start to more intentional reading. I hope it gave something to you as well, something to wrap up in your papers and lay on your mantelpiece. Thank you for being here. I will see you soon.